Hey, what's going on, everybody? Commander Crane here. We are back with another Pioneer deck tech, and today we're going to be talking about Gruul Spiders. Yes, Gruul Spiders, not a deck that I ever thought I would be making on this channel, but here we are, Gruul Spiders. So, as always, at the end of the video, let me know in the comment section below, what do you think about this deck? Is there a specific spider that I should have put in this deck that I did not? Or do you have suggestions for upcoming videos? Just let me know in the comment section. And the last thing I have to mention too before I really hop into the video is this is like a really confusing time for content creators such as myself, just because of the whole Spider-Man through the Omen Paths stuff that's going on. So I wanted to mention that all the MTG Arena variants of Spider-Man cards will be shared after the main board. So like if you wanted to build this deck on Arena, you at least like know what the names are. You don't have to go digging for them or anything like that, just to make things a little bit easier. I personally like to prioritize the paper versions just because paper is, I'm a big advocate for paper magic, so I like to share that specific version. And then whenever I reference any of the cards, it's going to be the paper version of the card. So just figured I would mention that. So, okay, let's go and hop into it here. So the true inspiration for the deck was Scarlet Spider Ben Reilly, which is really, I would say, probably my favorite card of the set just because of how, like, aggressive this card is. So worst case scenario, it's a 4-3 for 3 with trample. But best case scenario, it's a 2-mana 4-3 with trample, where we return a tapped creature to our hand, and then if it was cast using its web slinging, it enters with X1/1 counters on it, where X is the mana value of the returned creature. So this card can be pretty darn big, which is pretty sweet. And I got to thinking, like, is there enough spiders to make a Gruul Spiders deck? And there absolutely is. So that's why we're doing a Gruul Spiders deck today. So, we're playing 30 different spiders in the deck because, after all, we are an aggro deck. We want to predominantly be creatures. So, we are playing 4 Radioactive Spider and 4 Spinneret and Spiderling as our 1-drops. I really love Radioactive Spider. It's just a solid card. I mean, Reach and Death Touch is just kind of a pain. Like, it trades with anything, especially like Mono Red, for instance. Like, being able to trade with any of their creatures is pretty sweet. And then being able to sacrifice it and search for any of our, like, legendary spiders is pretty darn good. So, huge fan of that. Spinneret and Spiderling I really do like as an aggressive 1-drop as well. Whenever you attack with 2 or more spiders, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then it has the damage dealing ability, which is pretty sweet. So definitely a huge fan of this card. We are also playing 4 copies of Spider Ham Peter Porker, 4 copies of Spider Punk, and 2 copies of Twitching Doll. So Spider Ham is just, it's a lord. It's pretty good. It's a 2-mana lord. Makes a food token, I guess. Not that we're going to really take advantage of that. And then Spider-Punk. I think Spider-Punk is secretly the best card in this entire deck. Being able to give our spiders Riot is really sweet. Spells and abilities can't be countered, and damage can't be prevented, which is just really solid. It's just an aggressive card and just happens to fit the entire theme of our deck, which is pretty sweet. And then we're playing 2 copies of Twitching Doll. I really wanted another 2-drop in this slot, and like Twitching Doll is just pretty solid. We can use it to make mana, which can help us cast like some of our other bigger spells, but it's also pretty good because, you know, if we're doing nothing with it, we can just tap it to put a counter on it, and then eventually we can make a whole bunch of spider tokens with it. So I really do like the Twitching Doll in this deck. We are also playing 4 copies of the Scarlet Spider Ben Reilly, like we talked about. We are also playing 4 copies of Adaptive Automaton and 4 copies of Spinner of Souls. So Adaptive Automaton is just another lord. I wanted another lord in this deck. I've always loved playing like 8 lords in like my you know, like Coco aggro decks. So that's why we're playing the Adaptive Automaton. And then Spinner Souls is just a really solid card. It's a nice replacement effect for like, if your creatures die, you can kind of like keep digging for more creatures to just keep having gas. I think it's pretty darn solid, and that's why I wanted to play 4 copies of this one as well. And then rounding out our deck, we're playing 8 non-creatures. We're playing 4 Burst Lightning and 4 Collected Company. I wanted some early game removal, so that's why I chose Burst Lightning. I wanted to have the option to be able to throw it at our opponent's face in case like we get him down with all of our creatures, and then we just need that extra little bit of damage. And then Collected Company is Collected Company, and Collected Company is going to do Collected Company things. The card's nuts. It's like you live and die by it, but hey, when your Cocos are good, you win the game. When they're not as good, you're going to struggle a little bit. But I really do love Collected Company and Pioneer. So the next thing that we have to talk about is the Through the Omen Paths. That's what it is, the Through the Omen Paths card. So these are all the different names of the different spiders. So that way, instead of having to go to Google and try to find them or see what the name is, now you know what they are. And I must say, I really do like the Through the Omen Paths like art. I think it's all pretty solid. So if you're just playing on Arena and you're playing these versions, like honestly, it's not too bad. The cards honestly look pretty nice. So the next thing that we have to talk about is the land base. After all, we're playing 22 lands in our deck, which I think is pretty standard for the most part for a collected company deck that doesn't play really any mana dorks. I'm not cutting Twitching Doll on that one. But we are playing 4 copies of Copperland Gorge, 4 copies of the freshly printed Stomping Ground, and 4 copies of Carplusian Forest as our main dual lands. We are also playing 3 copies of Crag Crown Pathway, 1 Boseiju, and 1 Sukenzen for some utility. And then rounding out our lands, we're playing 2 copies of Cavernous Souls, 2 copies of Mutavault, and then 1 basic forest. I really love the Cavernous Souls in this deck just because obviously it's good against control. Enough said. Mutavault is great too because it obviously is a spider, so it fits the entire theme of our deck as well as just is really good late game utility. And then the 1 basic forest. So as our spicy basic land of the day, I mentioned this a few deck techs ago. Until further notice, every single basic land I feature is going to be an Elena Danner basic because she is my favorite land artist in the entire game, and I'm playing this one from Jumpstart. I have a whole bunch of these. I don't remember what Jumpstart pack this one's from. Maybe the no, it's not the Elementals one. I don't remember which one this one's from, but I really, really love this forest. Like, this is just... It's just so cool. I love this forest art. It's one of my favorites in the entire game, and honestly, a lot of her Jumpstart lands are really, really good, and this one is no exception to that. So the next thing we have to talk about is the sideboard, which is a relatively straightforward, like, Gruul, Coco, sideboard, mana base, or not mana base, but sideboard. But I always love to mention, though, if your sideboard looks a little bit different than mine, that's totally fine. This is just based off of what I've personally am running into on Magic Arena, as well as in paper, so I kind of wanted to build a sideboard that fit both of that. But we are playing 4 copies of Magebane Lizard, 2 copies of Rampaging Ferocidon, and 3 copies of Scrap Shooter as utility cards that we could put into play with Collected Company. Magebane Lizard obviously is great against all those decks that, cast a lot of non-creatures, or, just even if it's a 1 turn or if it's a bunch of removal, it's really good. Also, if I'm not mistaken, Peter Porker also buffs our lizards, which is kind of funny. So I forget, I feel like it buffs lizards. I can't remember. We'll know later. I'm talking about it later in the video. And then Rampaging Ferocidon is great against life gain decks, obviously, and go wide decks. So that's why we're playing copies of those. And then Scrap Shooter, we really are just playing it because it destroys artifacts or enchantments, and we can put it into play with Collected Company. So makes sense overall. And then we are playing 4 copies of Pick Your Poison because the card is just so incredible. It's so good. It's so efficient. For 1 mana, most of the time, you're able to naturalize something, which is pretty darn good. And then we're playing 2 copies of Unlicensed Hearse. I really love this as my graveyard hate of choice. I normally like to play cards like Scavenging Ooze and things like that, but I feel like Hearse is a little bit better just because it's harder to kill because it comes in as an artifact. Sure, opponent can still have like an Abrade, for instance, but it doesn't die to, I guess Go for the Throat is a bad example, but like a Torch the Tower or like any regular removal spell, that kind of thing. You have to have artifact hate to be able to take it out, unless we crew it, which most of the time we're not really doing that. So, big fan of Unlicensed Hearse in general in the sideboard. But the next thing that we have to talk about is the tips and strategies section. I always love going over this. I've got 2 tips that can help you, maybe not so much like help you improve playing this deck, but more so just things that maybe you didn't realize before, as well as going over some rulings. There's 2 different things I want to talk about. So the first one being Spider-Punk's ruling. I want to talk about like all of his abilities specifically because I know some people have questions on a lot of them, and a lot of people actually had questions in a previous video that I talked about this card. So with Riot, this creature enters with your choice of a 1/1 counter or haste. Pretty self-explanatory for the most part. Other spiders you control have Riot, which means that they enter with that choice of it, which obviously makes sense of that. So spells and abilities can't be countered. So that means obviously like your opponent, if they use like a counter spell, obviously like no Moralize. No Moralize is not going to work on any of your creatures. Well, actually, I take that back. It says spells and abilities can't be countered. So it's just all your spells. It's not even just spiders, which is, I think, what really makes this card fantastic. Abilities is also referring to, like, if someone uses, what's the new blue negate? I'm forgetting the name of it all of a sudden, but it's like counter a, like, instant sorcerer activated ability that obviously doesn't work. So just want to be clear on that, but it also symmetrical. So, but not that we're going to be countering any of our opponent's spells or abilities in our deck, but it is symmetrical. So if you play this in a different deck, Keep that in mind. And then damage can't be prevented. So what that's referring to is it's mostly referring to protection. So for instance, like if your opponent has a creature with protection from red, we attack with Spider-Punk and they block, the damage is still dealt to it because it can't be prevented. And part of protection is damage you control can't be prevented. This also prevents cards like Fog, for instance. So if our opponent is, prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this turn, it doesn't work if we have Spider-Punk in play. That's kind of the main thing with damage can't be prevented. There's some other niche cases, but those ones are kind of the main reason. Also, like for instance, like the One Ring, like the reason why people played Questing Beast so much for a long time and Stomp is because combat damage can't be prevented. So that's how people got around the One Ring. So just wanted to mention that with Spider-Punk. And then the other thing I have to mention is be careful of the legend rule when you're playing this deck. So we have a lot of legendary creatures in this deck because I guess unfortunately Wizards of the Coast decided they wanted to make every single Spider-Man a legendary creature. So it makes it tricky for our deck. So just make sure you're being careful and you're not playing like multiple of these copies in play at the same time. It can be a little bit awkward, so do keep that in mind. And also, yeah, Spider-Ham does boost lizards. It's just wait, raccoons, so it also boosts the Scrap Shooter. God, that card is ridiculous. I just happened to look at that. But anyways, so the last thing that I have to talk about is the budget options for this deck. So obviously you can swap out the Spider-Punk. They do go for about $6.50 a piece, but it makes sense because the card has utility outside of like Spider and Spider-Man cards. It's just a very, very good aggressive 2-drop. You can also play some budget dual lands, like I always talk about this. You could always cut like the Stomping Ground and a Caravan of Souls, and you can play some more budget dual lands. The current list as it's constructed right now is $233, which is pretty on par for a Gruul aggro Pioneer deck. Obviously, that's including Beseiju and Cavern of Souls and some of the pricier cards. But I was able to get the budget list down to $89, and I didn't trim anything in the main board except for the dual lands. I'm playing budget dual lands. I kept in the collected companies. I kept in the Spider-Punks. I kept everything else. And I was able to get it down to $89, which usually under $100 is pretty darn solid. But yeah, this deck was very fun to make. Obviously, if there's always an opportunity to make a Gruul deck here on the channel, I'm always going to make one, just because I think Gruul decks are really, really fun to play. Collected company decks are really, really fun, and it's always cool featuring new cards. Definitely let me know what you think about this deck in the comment section if there's a card that I forgot, or you want to know what, if you want to even tell me your opinions on the Spider-Man set, that's totally fine. Just let me know what you think in the comment section. And that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. The deck lists are in the description below if you'd like to check them out for yourself. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Sir One Loki, Michael D, our premium channel member, The Common Cold, Jeremy P, BG Stilts, and Darren M. If you're interested in being a channel member, it starts at $1 a month, and you can access the exclusive Commander Crane Discord, as well as other features here on the channel. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and hope to catch you in the next one.